Back to solid ground where purpose is found and life is rebuilt. My name is Shelly Robbins, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today. Maybe, this is one of those days where you don't really want to hear another motivational speech. So if that's you, I get it. Because I don't want this podcast to be another place where someone tells you to just think positive. Life doesn't work that way. Healing doesn't work that way. I think we've all learned that at some point or another, right? And rebuilding definitely doesn't work that way either. So here at Solid Ground, we're going to have real conversations. Some will be encouraging, some will be uncomfortable, some might even make you cry. Sorry. But my hope is that every single episode reminds you of one thing, that your story is not over. Today, I want to talk about something that honestly breaks my heart. It's something I've watched happen over and over and over again, whether it's someone that is leaving prison, escaping domestic violence, walking away from addiction, surviving homelessness, losing everything financially, or simply just trying to rebuild after life completely fell apart. The very first question that people ask is almost always the same. Brace yourself. Do you know what that question is? So have you found a job yet? That's the question. Like, we just default to the job. Now, before I go any further, I understand why people ask that. Bills don't stop coming in because you've experienced trauma. Rent is still due and children still need to eat. Cars still need gas. Life keeps moving, right? I understand all of that. But I think we're asking the wrong question, because if someone has survived the hardest season of their life, and the very first thing we ask them is about employment, about their paycheck, we may completely miss what they actually need. Maybe instead of asking, have you found a job, or how's the job going, we should be asking, have you found yourself? Have you came back home to yourself? Because those are two completely different questions, y'all. And here's why I say this is that I have spent nearly 20 years in recruiting and talent acquisitions, nearly 2 decades. I have interviewed thousands of people, literally thousands. I've sat across from executives making 6 figures. I've interviewed nurses, servers, maintenance techs, sales professionals, receptionists, regional directors, people fresh out of college. I have recruited sales reps that grew into top national producers in companies running their own business. Okay. People starting over at 55 years old. I've interviewed people who had every qualification on paper, and I've interviewed people whose resumes most companies would have overlooked without giving them a chance. And I've seen beautiful resumes that belong to people who had absolutely no confidence. Okay. Like, do you know how many times I have sourced through applicants? I'll see a resume and I'm like, wow, they look very experienced. They have the skill, and I get on the phone with them or I get in person with them, and their confident level, their transferable skills, their communication, their belief in themselves absolutely does not match what's on that resume. And I've seen people with gaps in employment as well, right? Criminal records that pop up when you do the background check, or incredibly difficult life stories. Because some of the strongest employees, they become some of the strongest employees, though, that I've ever hired. And it's unfortunate with criminal backgrounds, because a lot of individuals can get the job and then get declined afterwards because of something they did in their past. Now, of course, there are levels to that, right? Depending on what role and what type of crime it was. But there's literally some states that list traffic tickets on your criminal background check that will pop up when employers do a criminal background check. And that can literally decline you because of that. It would ultimately be up to the company if they're going to move forward or not. And that's kind of scary, right? We don't want that holding us back from moving forward. And even the more bigger offenses that you may have on your criminal record, you don't want that defining you. And So like I said, people with these type of issues may be actually some of the strongest people that we could hire. I have hired some amazing people with not the best backgrounds, and I'm not just speaking on criminal backgrounds, just life experience, right? So after all these years, I've learned something, that people don't usually fail because they lack talent. They fail because somewhere along the way, life has convinced them that they were not worth investing in anymore. Think about that for just a minute. Not because they weren't intelligent, not because they weren't capable, not because they couldn't learn, but because somewhere, someone, or something has convinced them that they did not matter. A lot of the times, this could even stretch back to our childhood, right? The programming that we had from our parents directly, which will put us in the pathway of even the type of employment we may seek. And once someone starts believing that, everything changes. And I want us to just sit there for just a second, because I don't think we realize how powerful our beliefs really are. Every decision that you make, it starts with something that you believe about yourself, right? If I believe I'm smart enough, I'll apply for the promotion. If I believe I'm lovable, I'll choose healthier relationships. If I believe I'm capable of anything, I guess I'll take that risk, right? But what happens when trauma literally changes what you believe? And I was just speaking on this, like, you have to understand, just because you believe it, it doesn't make it true. It's only true to you because you believe it. You have to reprogram your mindset and your belief system. But I mean, think about that though. What happens when trauma changes what you believe? Those life adversities, those words that are spoken to you over and over and over again by other individuals. What happens to your belief system? What happens when abuse teaches you that your voice doesn't matter no more? What happens when addiction convinces you that you will always fail? What happens when prison tells you your best days are behind you? What happens when you've been rejected so many times that you stop expecting anything different? Eventually, you don't just experience those things. You become identified by them, right? And you stop saying, well, I went through trauma, and you start believing I am damaged. You stop saying I made a mistake, and you start to believe I am the mistake. Do you hear the difference in that? One describes something that happened, and the other becomes your identity. And identity is powerful, y'all. In fact, I would argue identity will determine your direction. Who you believe you are will almost always determine what you believe you're capable of becoming. And that's why two people can experience almost the exact same hardship and end up in completely different places in life. One says, this happened to me. The other says, this is who I am. Those are completely different stories. And again, my friend Johnny, he shared with me a long time ago, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you. This does not define who you are. It is showing you something so you can make better decisions moving forward. Okay. And that stuck with me, that I am not the mistake. This is just a mistake. Or I am not the trauma. I am not it. I can't identify. And although I heard those words many years ago, it is something that I still struggle with at times. Right. But I'm aware of it. So I'm able to redirect myself if I'm starting to go down that path. And, shame is one of the greatest thieves of purpose I have ever seen in my life, because shame has a way of making you believe that you should stay small. Don't apply. Don't speak up. Don't dream too big. Don't start that business. Don't you go back to school. Don't date again. Don't trust people again. Don't even trust yourself. Just stay where it's safe. Stay invisible, right? Stay quiet. Because if you never try, you never have to risk failing again, right? But here's what I've learned is that playing small, it doesn't protect you from pain. It only protects you from purpose. And there is a huge difference. You know, one of the saddest interviews I ever conduct isn't with someone who lacks experience, it's with somebody who has forgotten who they are. You can hear it in their voice, literally. You can see it in the way they answer questions. They're apologizing before they even been rejected. They're trying to explain their worth before anyone has questioned it. They're shrinking themselves immediately. Even just their presence before a word is spoken, the way they walk into a room, the way they present themselves, the way they speak, the tone, the confidence, the eye contact, that handshake, right? And they're shrinking themselves, and not because they are unqualified, but because life taught them they needed permission to believe in themselves. And maybe that's you today. Maybe somewhere along the way, life got loud and the criticism got even louder than your confidence. And, you know, that goes into so many different directions. The rejection got louder than your dreams. The abuse got louder than your identity. The addiction got louder than your purpose. And that's where you are. And I want you to just hear me when I say this, that before we go any further, there is a difference between what happened to you and who you are. Okay, don't ever confuse the two, because one is part of your story and the other is still being written. So let's talk about identity for just a moment. All right, because I don't think that we lose ourselves overnight. Well, I know that we don't lose ourselves overnight, right? It happens little by little. One comment, one disappointment, one mistake, one betrayal, one abusive relationship. And that abusive relationship takes some time, right? Before you can call it an abusive relationship, because it's not just that one interaction, the one addiction, right? You don't get addicted with your first drink. One prison sentence, one layoff, one rejection after another. It's like carrying a backpack. And I'm sure you've heard the term, like carrying the backpack and all the weight that's inside of it. And, it's your baggage, right? And at first someone places one brick inside and you barely even notice it. Eventually, when you're putting one thing and another thing and another thing, you may not notice the weight at first, but eventually you're carrying so much weight for so long, you literally forget what it feels like to walk without it. And I think that's what's happened with labels. Nobody is born believing that they are broken. Matter of fact, I was watching Myron Golden today. He's one of my online mentors. And he reminded me, guess what? You weren't born with belief system, like a belief of yourself or about life. And a matter of fact, you didn't have any belief truly of who you were or those around you in your environment for probably the first 18 to 24 months of your life. So then he's like, now let's fast forward to being an adult. And here we are thinking that what we believe is true. And we only believe that is true because what we think what's true is what we believe. Like it's just this cycle that breaks down our mentality and our confidence within ourselves. And again, nobody is born believing they're broken. Think about a little kid. Child doesn't walk around saying, I'm not enough, I'm too much, I'll never be successful, I'm damaged. Those beliefs are learned. Somewhere along the way, someone's words, somebody's actions, absence even, it began writing a story, and you never agreed to that storyline, okay? And over time, you started reading it as if it was the truth. And I can tell you something right now. One of the biggest lies that trauma tells us is this: if it happened to me, it must say something about who I am. Think about that. If I was abused, there must be something wrong with me. If I went to prison, I'll never be respected again. If I struggled with addiction, I'll never be trusted. If I got a divorce, I must have failed, right? If I lost my job, I must not be good enough. Do you see what happened? That event, it literally becomes your identity, and they're not the same thing. There's a quote I've always loved. It says, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become." But as I mentioned, my friend Johnny said, yeah, it's not happening to you. It's happening for you. Meaning it's just a moment in time that's something that is happening for you to become aware of that, learn from it, and grow. But it doesn't define you and write your future. Right? And I believe that. But I also know choosing who you're becoming, it's not easy because we live by default so much opposed to design, especially when you've spent years in survival mode, because survival has a different job than purpose. Survival asks you, what do I have to do to get through today? Purpose asks, what kind of life am I building? Those are two completely different questions. And here is something I wish more people understood, that survival is not something to be ashamed of. If you're listening to this right now and all you can do yesterday was get out of bed, I'm proud of you. Okay? I'm so proud of you because I understand that. And trust me, just because you have healed and you may have moved forward, it doesn't mean you're going to have one of those days again, or a week even, where you can't get out of bed. I just want, if all you could do, like literally, was make sure your kids had dinner, or you stayed sober one more day, or even just this afternoon, I'm proud of you. If you didn't text the person you knew would pull you backwards, I'm freaking proud of you. Sometimes surviving is the victory, right? But survival, actually, it was never meant to become the permanent place that you reside in. It's supposed to be just a season, not your destination. And I know that's easier said than done because I myself have been surviving my entire life, especially like complex PTSD. It says that it's not just one identifiable traumatic event that has happened where you're associating that PTSD, right? Complex is like one thing after another. So the person, the place, the environment, the actual actions that were taking place, it could be from the one time or it just continuous throughout your life. And that is really hard if that starts young and it's a continual pattern, because it writes you into survival. That's all you're doing is surviving opposed to thriving. And healing has this strange way of making us question ourselves, especially after domestic violence. I want to speak to the domestic violence survivors for just a minute. One of the things people don't understand is that abuse doesn't just break your heart. Okay, it attacks your identity little by little by little. You stop trusting your instincts. You stop trusting your memory. You stop trusting your emotions. You start asking questions like, maybe I overreacted. Maybe it just wasn't that bad. Maybe I am the problem. That's what manipulation does. I hope you understand that. It slowly disconnects you from yourself. So when you do finally leave, people expect you to immediately become confident again. But confidence doesn't come back overnight. And you're rebuilding something that was intentionally torn down by someone who said they loved you. So that takes time. If you were in prison, if you've been incarcerated, your experience may look different. But the internal battle can be very similar, right? Because society has a way of making sure that your past follows you forever. And every application, every interview, every background check, every awkward conversation, it's almost like you're constantly wondering, when should I tell them? What are they going to think? Will they even give me a chance? And that don't even got to be the job. That could just be a friendship, a relationship, to be able to be in the room. And after hearing no enough times, you start expecting rejection before anyone has even answered. That's exhausting. So tiresome. But here's what I want you to remember, okay? A background check can tell someone where you've been. It cannot tell someone who you are becoming. And there's a difference. I think one of the greatest tragedies in our society is that we are fascinated by people's worst moments and that we rarely celebrate their rebuilding. And we'll share the mugshot, but not the graduation. We'll talk about the addiction, but not the sobriety. We'll gossip about the divorce, but not the healing that comes afterwards, right? We'll remember the arrest, but forget the decade of faithfulness that came afterwards. Isn't that interesting? We literally become experts on people's failures and strangers to their transformation. And that's one of the reasons that I created Solid Ground, because I wanted there to be a place where rebuilding was celebrated, where people were not reduced to one chapter of their life, where someone could say, yes, that happened, and here's who I'm becoming now. Because I believe becoming deserves just as much attention as surviving. Actually, even more. I want to ask you a question. If I took away every title you've ever had, ever, your job, your relationship status, income, your education, your mistakes, your accomplishments, who are you? Who are you? Do you even know how to answer that? And not what do you do, not what happened to you, who are you? Sit with that for just a minute. Because the thing is, many of us have spent so much time introducing ourselves by our circumstances that we have literally forgotten how to introduce ourselves by our character. Maybe that's where rebuilding starts, right? Myron Golden, I mentioned him earlier. There was something that I learned from him a couple years back when I first came across his content. It was the be, do, have. Everyone wants to have the lifestyle, have the money, have the house, have the relationship, have the status, right? But you got to do the thing. And you got to be the person to have what you want. And we have that all backwards. We think if we have it first, then we will be the person once we have it. We do it backwards. That's why if we get it, we can obtain it, but we can't retain it because we're not actually the person to do so. We haven't had that actual transformation, right? So that's the order. Remember that. Be, do, have. You need to become the person first in order to do the thing that you are setting out to do to have the results that you want. And that's for everything in life. Maybe, again, that's where rebuilding starts, right? Is rebuilding our character or building our character and feeling confident enough to share it with people. It's not with the new job. It's not with that new relationship or with more money. Maybe rebuilding starts when you stop asking what happened to me and start asking, who do I want to become? Because once you answer that question, everything else begins to align. So if identity is the foundation, what comes next? Purpose, the do, right? Identity, when you're creating the foundation of identity, it's the becoming, it's the building, it's who you are being. Then there is the do part, which is the purpose. What are you doing, right? And I think purpose is one of the most misunderstood words there is. People ask me all the time, Shelly, how do I find my purpose? Almost like purpose is hiding somewhere, okay? And like one day you're just gonna wake up and the sun is going to shine a little bit brighter and the birds are gonna be singing and suddenly like you're going to know exactly what you're supposed to do with the rest of your life. And y'all, sorry to break it to you, that's not how that works, all right? In fact, I think that belief keeps a lot of people stuck, and because they're waiting for clarity instead of taking action. And I'll tell you, what I think purpose actually is. I think purpose is discovered while you're moving, okay? Not while you're waiting. Think about your navigation system, your GPS. You can put an address into your phone, but until you start driving, it can't even reroute you. It can't adjust. It can't show you another way. Movement creates direction, and the same is true in life. So many people tell me that I'm waiting until I know exactly what I'm supposed to do. And my question is always like, what are you doing while you're waiting? Because sometimes the very thing that you're waiting to discover is waiting on you to take that one small step. Purpose isn't always revealed all at once, y'all. Like sometimes it's revealed one act of obedience at a time. Sometimes it's just one conversation, one opportunity, one yes, one risk, one uncomfortable decision. When I look back over my own life, I realized there were seasons where I thought I was just working, just recruiting, just interviewing people, just helping companies hire. And I didn't realize at the time God was teaching me to see people. Not resumes, but people, right? My recruitment started with my very first company I was with. And full circle, I'm jumping back in that real soon, but it started there. And at first it was just intentional about, earning a check. But through that, it was like painting the picture and creating the vision based on the person I was speaking to. And for me to do that, I had to meet them where they were, get to know them a little bit more than what their resume application was saying or what we even had to offer and what I was assuming that they wanted, right? I had to see the people. So he was teaching me, God was teaching me to listen beyond someone's answers, to hear the actual confidence they didn't have and recognize the fear hiding behind professionalism. To notice when someone needed encouragement more than another interview question. And, at that time, I thought I was building a career, but looking back, I think God was preparing me for a much bigger calling because, like I said, I feel like I am the bridge between purpose and mission. I want to be able to align people in order to identify who they are. I want to see who they are and put them in the position and place and environment and opportunity that's going to allow them to expand in their purpose and where they wake up every day feeling like they're making a difference, no matter what it is that they are doing. And I wonder how many things in your life that you've dismissed because they seemed ordinary, or maybe you've been raising children, maybe you've been caring for your parents, maybe you've been volunteering or you've been working a job you don't really enjoy anymore or never did, but maybe you're just rebuilding your own life. And what if those weren't really like interruptions in your path? Instead of interruptions, they were preparation. Sometimes we spend so much time asking, when does my purpose begin, that we completely miss the fact it's already been shaping us. I believe your purpose often leaves clues. Think about it this way. What makes you angry? Not annoyed, but angry. What injustice makes your heart race? What problem do you keep noticing that everyone else seems to ignore? What conversation could you have for hours without ever getting bored? Who do you naturally want to help? What have you survived that someone else is trying to survive right now? Those questions matter because your greatest pain may become someone else's greatest source of hope. And notice I didn't say your pain was sent to you for a reason. There are things that happen in this world that are simply heartbreaking, okay? And addiction destroys families. People make choices that deeply, deeply wound another person or other people. And I'm never going to tell someone everything happened for a reason, because when you're sitting in the middle of unimaginable pain, those words are often, they feel empty, right? They are empty. But I do believe this. We get to decide what pain produces in us. Pain can make us bitter or it can make us compassionate. Pain can isolate us or can connect us with people who need someone to understand them. Pain can become the end of the story, or it can become the place where purpose begins, right? purpose over pain all day long. Pain is where you may start, but it can literally be a driving force. And I'm not even say use it as like the gas that's needed to drive you there, but it is a place that can be the first clue where your purpose lies. You know, one thing I've noticed after interviewing as many people as I have it within my career is that people who have rebuilt carry themselves differently, not louder, not more arrogant, actually the exact opposite. There's a quiet confidence about them, and they don't need to prove anything, because when you've lost everything and rebuilt your life, you stop looking for validation from everyone else. You know who you are, and that confidence can't be taught in a classroom. Okay, it just can't. It comes from surviving what you thought would destroy you. Like I say, it's not on me, it's in me. I want to be honest with you. Sometimes I think we're chasing confidence so much when we should be chasing consistency. Listen to that one more time. We are chasing confidence when we should be chasing consistency. Confidence comes and goes. It just does. Just like motivation. If we only, like the days you want to go to the gym, right? You may go for a whole week because you felt motivated. And then that day comes where you no longer feel motivated. So you stop going. The consistency of the discipline of following through on the decisions you already made, the goals you've already set, that's what we need to be chasing. Some days you will feel amazing, some days you don't, but consistency will change your life. Discipline, structure will change your life. And the person who, if you're the person who applies for one job every day, will eventually find an opportunity. I highly recommend, though, from a talent acquisition standpoint, apply for more than one job a day, because there's a lot of competition out there, unfortunately, and your resume could be overlooked. But the point is, it's the consistency behind it, right? Don't spend one day applying for 10 or 15 jobs and then don't do it again for 30 days. You want to be consistent on a daily basis. And even the person, like if it comes down to reading, if you're reading 10 pages every day, you're going to finish the book eventually, right? Or a chapter a day. You will finish that book rather quickly. The person who chooses sobriety one day at a time, and if you've ever sat in an AA meeting, they'll literally tell you 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. Okay, because I've been there. I know. And sometimes it really is just that, a minute at a time to rebuild your life. And if you are a person who spends even 15 intentional minutes with your children every evening, put the phones down, turn off all electronics. That is a distraction, right? I mean, you may watch a movie or something like that, but that intentional interaction where you're engaging, you're on their level with them, you're playing with them, you're talking to them about their interests, you're showing them love and compassion and just being there 15 minutes a day. Do you know what that does for your kid? There's really no words. I mean, it will build so much trust between you and your child. The confidence that you are supposedly chasing, they'll have already because they had a parent like you who was consistent with the intentional time spent. Right? The person who keeps showing up eventually becomes someone they can depend on. And so purpose isn't usually one giant moment. It's literally thousands of ordinary decisions made consistently over time. I mean, they say success is like the small habits that we do daily that create success. So that's why another quote that I do love is success is never owned, it's rented, and the rent is due every day. Okay. We got to show up every day. We got to pay our dues. And the same could be said for healing. Healing is not a destination. Like I said, I'm healing. I'm not healed. Because I think in our healing journey, that is our life, right? Because every day, every week, every month, every year, there's opportunity to become more aware of ourselves, our environment, our intentions, our actions, our thoughts, our words spoken, and learn how to be even just 1% better, not for the world, but for ourselves, right? It's a daily practice. So purpose isn't a title. It's how you choose to live. Maybe your purpose today is simply becoming the parent your child needs, or it's staying sober. Maybe your purpose today is forgiving yourself. Maybe your purpose today is filling out one application, right? Or 10, take my advice, at least 10. Maybe it is just resting, okay? I intentionally took time off work, like a couple weeks, to rest, to mentally be healthy, to be at home and not be expected to do a damn thing, all right? Because your body when your body has been in survival mode for too long, purpose, like literally, doesn't have to be impressive. It is literally just escaping from survival, because your body has been in survival mode for too long. So purpose doesn't have to be impressive. It has to be intentional. And here's something I hope that you won't ever forget, is that the world doesn't need another perfect person. It's not perfection we're chasing, it's progression, okay? It needs more healed people in this world, more honest people, more people willing to say, hey, I've been there, and if I made it through, I'm going to reach back out and help someone else, right? That's what rebuilding looks like. Not arriving, reaching back, paying it forward. Because someone once reached back for us at some point, somewhere in our life, somewhere along the way, at least once, right? Whether it was a counselor, a pastor, a friend, probation officer who believed in us, a teacher, a sponsor, or maybe just one person who refused to let us quit. None of us rebuild completely alone, and maybe one day you'll be the person for someone else. I mean, I was just having a conversation the other day that, it seems like society these days in 2026, that we romanticize the idea of isolation. But we are humans, and connection is so important, and we need community. We need someone in our corner, and that's okay to say that. We're human beings. It's part of who we are and what we do, right? And so before we wrap up today, I do want to say something to the employers who might be listening right now, okay? If you're a hiring manager, if you are the business owner, if you are the person who makes the decision on someone being offered a position, because I know some of you are, but maybe you're responsible for deciding whether someone gets a second chance. Let me challenge you for just a moment. When you look at a resume, you're looking at just a snapshot, all right? Just a quick snapshot, not a whole person. A resume can tell you where someone has worked. It can tell you what degree they've earned. It can tell you how long they stayed at a company, right? It can tell you where they have gaps, either from one job to the next, or their skills and abilities. But it cannot tell you how hard someone fought to get into that interview. It doesn't tell you that they escaped an abusive relationship 6 months ago. It doesn't tell you they spent the last year caring for a parent with cancer. And it doesn't tell you they finally get sober after years of addiction. It doesn't tell you that they came home from prison determined to build a different life and not be defined by the old one. It doesn't tell you that they spent the last 3 years rebuilding their confidence after somebody else spent every day convincing them that they were worthless. You can't see courage on a resume. You can't measure resilience with a job title, y'all, okay? You can't always quantify character. Sometimes the strongest candidate in the room isn't the one with the perfect resume. It is the one who refused to quit. Now, am I saying everyone deserves every opportunity? No, okay? People have to take responsibility. People have to do the work. People have to show up consistently. People have to earn trust. Absolutely. But if someone has done the work, if they've owned their mistakes, if they've committed to becoming someone different, don't make them spend the rest of their life paying for a chapter that they've already worked to rewrite. Because here's the truth. We all want grace for our own mistakes. Let's make sure that we are willing to extend it to somebody else. Okay? Now, I want to come back to you. The one listening, the one who's wondering if this episode was meant for you. All right. Maybe you're sitting in your car right now. Maybe you're on a walk, you're cleaning your house while this is playing in the background. I don't know. Maybe you almost turned this episode off because you thought this couldn't possibly be for me. Who is this girl, Shelly, right? But you're still here, so maybe it is. Can I ask you something? You listening? What if the reason you've been feeling stuck isn't because you're incapable? What if it's because you've been trying to build your future while carrying an identity that belongs to your past? Think about it. Think about trying to build a house on a cracked foundation. No matter how beautifully the house is, eventually those cracks begin to show, babe. That's why solid ground isn't just about careers. It isn't just about healing. It isn't just about purpose. It's about foundation. Because if the foundation changes, everything built on top of it, it changes too. Your relationships, your confidence, your career, parenting, your friendships, your finances, even the way you talk to yourself. It all starts with what you believe is true about you, right? So today, I don't want you to leave here thinking I need to fix my whole life. No, that's overwhelming. All right. I just want you to begin telling yourself a different story. Instead of I'm damaged, try I'm healing. Instead of I'm behind, try I'm rebuilding. Right? Instead of I'll never recover, try I'm becoming. Those words matter. The words you speak matter. I need you to understand that. They matter. Because the conversations you have with yourself literally become the life you eventually create. Like, think about it. Words, spelling, there's spells. It's very much true. The tongue is powerful. Be careful how you speak to yourself. You have the ability to recreate what that looks like, what it sounds like, how it resonates within. It may take time for you to start believing it. But that's up to you. You have to take that first step, right? Consistency daily. Now, before you close this episode, I want to invite you into something, okay? Not because I think one exercise changes your life, but because I believe awareness changes everything. Just imagine how many people are walking around and not aware of everything or themselves. So what I want you to do is grab your journal, your notebook, your note app, whatever you got to take notes, okay? Whatever you have. Don't rush it. Maybe even pause this episode if you need to, all right? But step one, at the top of the page, write these words. The story I've been telling myself, not the story other people tell you, okay? Yours. Be honest. Maybe, like I said, I'm always going to struggle. I ruin relationships. I'll never be financially stable. I'm not leadership material. I'm too old. I'm too broken. I'm too far behind. I'm not educated enough. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not enough, right? Write it down. Every lie you have started believing. Don't judge yourself. Just notice it. Then step two. Now ask yourself this question. When did I first start believing this? Right? Not yesterday. Go back. Who first made you feel like you weren't enough? Was it something a parent said, a teacher, a coach, your abusive partner, a prison sentence, a mistake, your divorce, a layoff, the betrayal? Sometimes we're living according to beliefs we've accepted 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, without ever stopping to ask if they're actually true, right? So figure that out. And then step three, now write another heading that says what is actually true. This isn't positive thinking. This is honest thinking. If your mind says I'm a failure, ask yourself, is that completely true? Or have I failed at some things and succeeded at others, right? If your mind says, I'm weak, ask yourself, would a weak person have survived everything I've survived? If your mind says, I have nothing to offer, Ask yourself, what wisdom have you gained because of what you've lived through? Truth is stronger than shame, I promise. And every single time, the truth, not what you believe, your truth will be stronger than that. All right. Step 4, turn the page, write this sentence for me, or scroll down on your notes apps. All right. The person I'm becoming. Finish that sentence. The person I'm becoming, fill in the blank. Don't write who you wish you were. All right. Write who you're committed to becoming. And maybe it's, maybe you want to be a woman who trusts herself again, right? A man of integrity, a present father, a peaceful mother, a business owner, a faithful employee, someone who keeps their word, someone who lives with courage instead of fear, someone who chooses peace over chaos. Now, here's the important part. Pick one, not 10, just one. Because identity isn't built through giant declarations, right? It's built through repeated decisions. So tomorrow morning, before you check social media, before you check your emails or you answer a single text message, look in the mirror, not at your clothes, not at your hair, not at everything you wish you could change. Look yourself in the eyes and say this. Then ask yourself one question, okay? What would that person do today? Not this year, today. Would they make the phone call? Would they go to counseling? Would they apply for the job? Apologize? Would they forgive? Would they take the walk? Would they stay sober today? Would they spend 30 uninterrupted minutes with their children? Would they finally believe they deserve peace? Then do that one thing, not because it's dramatic, because it's consistent. Remember what we talked about. Purpose isn't built in giant moments. It's built in ordinary decisions made over and over and over again. So if this episode encouraged you, I would love for you to share it, not because I'm chasing downloads or likes and subscriptions and all the things, right? But because I know someone in your life is quietly believing that they're nothing more than their worst chapter. Maybe this conversation is exactly what they need today. And if you decide to do this week's Solid Ground Challenge, I love to hear from you, truly. Send me a message, leave a comment, share one word that describes who you're becoming, not what you've survived. I want to know who you are becoming. Because here's what I believe with all of my heart. Healing often begins in quiet places. Sometimes it's just you and God. All right, working through things no one else can see. But transformation happens when we begin walking alongside one another, when we stop pretending, when we stop hiding, when we realize we're not the only ones rebuilding. That's what Solid Ground is. It's not just a podcast. It is a community of people choosing every single day to build something stronger than what tried to break them. So wherever you are today, whether you're taking your very first step or your 1,000th, I don't really care. Keep going. One decision, one brick, one day at a time, because one day you are going to look back and realize something very beautiful. The thing you thought would define your life became the very thing that prepared you to change someone else's. Do you understand? And that's where you're going to find your purpose. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Thank you for trusting me with part of your journey. And until next time, just remember this: you are more than your past. All right. Your past may explain your story, but it does not have permission to write your ending. This is Solid Ground, where purpose is found and lives are rebuilt. I'll see you next week.